In March of 96, I came across the human design in an astrology magazine. And because it was a mandala, what I call the mandala of synthesis, the wheel with the body graph inside of it all colored in, and the hexagrams of the I Ching around the edges. And I knew what that was because I had been studying as a Jungian analyst. And of course, Jung studied astrology, and he also talked about mandalas. And in 1992, I had gone to England to study astrology with an astrologer named Pamela Crane. And I studied astrology with her because she had a system that she called interdimensional astrology. And in it, we used three wheels. We used the tropical wheel, the draconic wheel, and the sidereal wheel. So I was using tri-wheels and looking for more than birth astrology could show us. But we were using the birth date. And one of the things Pamela introduced me to, which becomes very relevant, is that she worked with dwads. So in every 30-degree astrological sign is another whole zodiac of 360 degrees. So you can break the planetary positions and their sign into sub-layers, and it sort of gives a unconscious coloring to that planet, the underbelly, if you will. So I was used to working with lots of data. And what Pamela did with me was using the three different systems, tropical, draconic, and sidereal, we would color the mandala using each wheel for different segments of the mandala. And when I did it different ways, using different astrological systems, you could almost feel the energy of the person. And you could, if you did, let's say, the tropical, draconic, and sidereal, it would look one way. If you did the tropical, dwad, and super dwad, so you carried it out to its harmonics, you would get a different feeling about the person. And I did this with some of my clients in groups, coloring their charts. And it was fascinating, but I didn't quite know where to take it. And I'll get back to that because it is part of informing me about the four worlds, that we're always looking at the levels of consciousness and how can we measure it? How can we find it? How can we learn about it? Because it's under the surface of our waking world. So in 1996, I met Zeno. I saw the mandala. I immediately dialed my phone. Chaitanya picked up the phone, and I said, how can I study this? And he said, well, Zeno happens to be in LA. And I said, well, that's where I live. So I arranged for a private class with Zeno. And she came for a weekend. We got along really well. And I learned the human design system. Now, there was no computer program for human design at the time. And there was no way to do a chart other than coloring it in yourself. So I learned how to color it in myself. And Zeno and Chaitanya had the exclusive rights at the time for New Sunwear America. And you had to buy the pads with the body graph from them. You needed to buy your chart. It was very controlled. And if you copied it, they would disenfranchise you, so to speak. In any case, I immediately was fascinated by the human design chart, and I studied it, and I became an analyst pretty quickly, doing a reading for Zeno. And then in May of 1996, so 2 months after I learned design, Ra came to America from Ibiza and was teaching about circuits. And it was the first time he had attempted to piece together ways in which the channels in the body map flowed or made sense. So I attended a 5-day class. It was called Advanced Human Design. It was a class of about 20 to 25 people. Chetan was in that class, and Tom Pfeiffer was in that class. Tom and I sat next to each other and became friends. And I kept asking, is there an exam? Are we going to get certified? What's the plan? And it was not organized. But toward the end of the 5 days, it came to light that there would be an exam. And if you wanted to stay certified, you needed to pass the exam. So Marvin left, and I stayed for an extra week to study and take the exam. And of course, I passed and got to know in that week more about Ra. He gave the class, and then for those of us who stayed to take the exam, he talked about composites, and he also talked about his story. And Ra's story was that the way he told it, and I'll try to be exacting in terms of what he said he was successful, and he was a businessman, and he didn't tell us what he did. I learned out later that he was a scam artist. But what he told us was that one day he went to the airport in Toronto and disappeared. And after 7 years, he was just declared dead, and that he had no identity, that he was just gone, and that he lived in a tree, which wasn't exactly the case. He lived in a hut in Ibiza. And he said that he had left his wife, his daughter, and a stepson. Sarah was about 7 at the time, and he just disappeared. And after The Voice, he had gotten back in touch with Sarah, and they had sort of mended fences. And she was, I don't know if she was there then. I think he just talked about her then. But he taught us how to look at 2 charts together or look at transits. And I took the exam and I went home, and Ra went back to Europe. And he came back. It was October of 96. He came back to Taos in May of 97. And at that class, and in the interim, between the time I studied and got certified as an analyst and the time Ra came back in May, I had shared the human design chart with many of my clients. I was very excited about it. I had done some readings using the astrology of design. The astrology is not on the body graph. So I would put the astrology next to the planets, next to the hexagrams, and got into quite a bit of depth trying to decipher it. So when I went back to Taos in May of 97, I had a lot of questions. And I'd already asked Ra, because I'd met him before in October, I had asked him about putting secondary progressions into the chart, transits into the chart. I was curious about the question that I always ask astrologers: how would you know prior to an event that that's the event that would happen? And nobody could tell me. And Rod dismissed the progressions. So when I visited in May of 97, Rod was talking about profile. It was the first time Ra spoke about profile. And he did so and created the concept of profile because I had arranged when he visited, well, he hadn't visited yet, so I hadn't arranged it, but he was coming up with a concept that would be saleable and people could understand how to decipher the charts. I had one day at that time to be in the class. It was a one-day class. And then I returned home because we had a sick cat. So I invited Ra in May of 97 to come to California and to stay at my home, Marvin and my home. And I said, we could get you all the readings you'd want. So he took me up on the offer and came in September of 1997. And he stayed with us for, I believe, 2.5 weeks. He was our house guest, and we booked him solid with cash paying clients. I would say 8 to 10 clients a day. And Ra, it was very grateful and would sit around with us at breakfast or in the evenings and tell us about his life. And what he told us was that before he left and disappeared, what he did was to sell elderly people things that didn't exist. So he was basically a scam artist, not highly educated. He had a bachelor's degree. That was it. And he had been very humbled by the experience he had with the voice. And it came at a time when he was a heavy user of drugs. He was always stoned on marijuana and cigarettes. And I never saw him outside without a cigarette. He also, prior to the voice, was addicted to ketamine and who knows what else. So he was a real druggie and a scam artist and just disappeared on his family. So you have someone who was completely humbled by being given the body map and being missioned with disseminating it to the world. So our visit in September of 97 was very congenial. we got along with Ra great. He loved McDonald's. He loved In-N-Out burgers. He did not like the highly spicy Indian food that I love. And we had a lot of laughs. So I went back to Taos in October of 97. And that was a class Ra was doing on centers. And what he said was the voice spoke to him. And when the voice spoke to him about centers, it spoke to him in the energy of the center, in the energy of how that center functioned. It took 5 days for the voice to give him the body map. And what Ra told me subsequently was that the voice spent 5 days with him on the body graph, making sure.
Queres ouvir no instante? É ela? É esta com que eu estou? É esta? Não posso. Could we mute, please? Thank you.
That the voice wanted him to get the body graph very exact, and that it spent 5 days with him making sure that the measurements of the body graph were exact. That is the body graph that was put into Eric Memmert's computer program. And that is the body graph that I currently use, because it is the only one that has the exact sacred geometry of what was given to Ra. And I do own the body graph of that, because it was not copyrighted when Ra and I formed our partnership. So he tasked me with copywriting everything, and my company owns the copyrights. So in October of 97, at that meeting was a very significant turning point in my relationship with Ra. I had started to do groups every Friday evening, talking about human design and looking at transits and looking at pulling apart segments of the design material I had learned to see where it sat clinically with people, and also how it fit with the astrological and the tree of life. So we had the class on centers, and I had stayed for an extra couple of days to spend time talking to Ra and talking to him about the work that I was doing and how we could move it into more of a mainstream or more of a professional discipline. What happened at that meeting was extremely distressing. What happened was that Zeno was there and Ra was there. And I said that I was doing these classes and working with people on transits and exploring the body graph and doing readings as an analyst. And Zeno said, "What are you charging for the readings?" And I said, "Well, I'm charging my usual session fee." And I think at the time, maybe it was around $300, which for an hour of my time was not a high fee. And Zeno said, "You can't charge that." And I said, "Why not? It's my fee." She said, "I can't charge that. I charge $150. So all the analysts can only charge $150 because they can't charge more than me." And I said, "I can't ethically do that. so I won't do readings anymore. And Ra sat there silently. And when we left, and I was giving him a ride to a party, he turned to me and said, "Be patient. The analyst, you're an analyst. You'll do something different." And I looked at Ra and I said, "You know, Ra, I don't do business this way." And I went home and I was done. I was completely done. And I was willing to continue to relate to Ra, but not to be as open as I had been. I was on guard. They scheduled a trip for February 1998. And for that trip, Zeno wanted to do it in a hotel. She scheduled a hotel on Sunset Boulevard in Brentwood, a high-cost hotel. The rooms were probably $300 or $400 a night at that point, and they expected that I would fill their schedule. So about a month before they were due to arrive, a client of mine, a very long-standing client, wanted a reading. And I faxed her name and her information to Zeno. And the amount of money that she was going to be charged had the $25 discount for early registration. Zeno didn't like the way I did it for some reason. I don't even remember what. I faxed it or I didn't fill it out right, some technical thing. And she said, "I can't give the discount." And I said, "Why not?" "You didn't do this right." And I said, "This is a longtime client of mine. A $25 discount is goodwill. And she will come to everything I do. But I'm not going to charge her full fee because she's that kind of client." And Zeno refused to do it. So the consequence was that I didn't have my client have a reading, and I did not refer a single person to Ra during that February event. As it so happened, God intervened. And my grandson was born on February 7th, about a week before Ra's visit. And Noah was born 6 weeks premature. He was in a NICU. And needless to say, we were pretty stressed. He was an emergency C-section, and 5 more minutes and he and my daughter would have died. So at that point, my daughter went and had a reading with Ra. Ra and I and Marvin had an agreement that because of all the clients we sent him, he didn't charge our family for readings. And moreover, he always charged half price for children. He charged my daughter full fee. So that was all I needed, on top of me picking him up at his hotel, taking him for an In-N-Out burger, coming back to my house to spend an afternoon with him, only to have Zeno call and say, "I double booked you, you have to come back, you can't stay." And rather than telling her to rebook the conflict on her end, he left the time we were going to spend talking about his work. And I drove him back to the hotel. And that was, as far as I was concerned, the end of my relationship with him. So I told my friend Tom that I was 100% done with Ra. And Tom, because he was my ally and my friend and a supporter, bootlegged video audios for me. So Zeno and Chaitanya would not allow anyone except them to record, not even Ra. And they took a long time to release anything. And as far as I know, they never released those transcripts. But Tom bootlegged them. He had a mic under his shirt. He had an MP3 player. He went to great lengths. And if he had gotten caught, it would have been not nice. But he did it. And after each seminar that Rod did, he sent me the audio tapes. Fast forward to May of 1999. And this is where my relationship with Ra really began. I got a phone call, I believe it was from Chaitan. And he said, Ra had a premature baby who almost died. He is bankrupt. He had a falling out with Zeno and Chaitanya and is no longer speaking to them. And he needs money to get back to Ibiza. Can he come and stay in your home with his wife and 2 kids? And can you fill his schedule so he can earn enough money to get back to Ibiza? I said, call me back in a half hour. I need to speak to my husband. And Marvin and I discussed it. And we agreed that although Ra was a scoundrel and not to be trusted, that the message he carried through the human design body map was important and significant enough that we would honor the messenger. And so we welcomed him to our home. He did not end up coming with his wife and kids at that trip. He did later. They all stayed in our home. And he came and we began scheduling him. And he was very grateful. And Marianne Winokur had bought him or rented him or something, a house in Sedona. So he had moved his wife and kids to Sedona, and he was living there. So he spent a few days with us. We always got along with him. We'd watch television with him. He was friendly to our animals. At that time, Marvin's soul cat, Holly, was dying, and Ra was around during that time. And after about 4 or 5 days, Ra said, would we do some workshops with him? And could he organize a workshop on type or on formats? And we said, sure. You know, we had a very special house in Pacific Palisades, California, that had a living room that could hold about 100 people. And so I did groups there, and we also would sponsor people who would do work there. And when I was president of the Hypnosis Society, we would do all of the meetings in our home. So we said, of course, and we helped Ra arrange it. We notified all of our people, and we could easily fill a room. So Ra gave a couple of lectures, and Tom Pfeiffer came and visited and recorded. And we came clean with Ra that we had bootlegged stuff. He was thrilled. He was absolutely delighted that we had preserved what he no longer had. And within a few days, he made Marvin and me a proposal. And the proposal was that he would come back within a couple of weeks, and he wanted us to become legal business partners. And he would tell us, in however much time it took, everything the voice told him, so we could study it scientifically. Marvin, in terms of medical specialties and clinical medical stuff, and me as a social scientist and a psychologist clinician with the clinical, psychological, as well as the social science research. So I said no, and Marvin said yes. And Marvin appealed to me to do it, and I deferred to him and agreed. So we arranged with Ra, and I got busy with the lawyers and making a company for the two of us as partners, having a partnership legal agreement, determining what we would do. And Ra's proposal, which is what we implemented, was that we would be business partners 50-50, and that we would be the professional arm of the human design material, that it would be my job to document it scientifically and to teach it clinically, and that Marvin would be the medical doctor who would be looking at different body maps and seeing if what Ross said would hold true clinically. So that was the June of '99. And I got busy with beginning to teach, beginning to look, I did the statistics, and I do have the statistics to share with all of you today. So you will get the science of what I did. But at the time, we found out we signed the contract with Ra in July, a legal contract. We did it pretty quickly. The name of the company was Rave Life Sciences. And we made a website, and we began to think about what we were going to teach and what we were going to sell as products. We scheduled a seminar for November of 1999 in Santa Monica at the Lantana buildings on Olympic. So we were making it a real thing, like a real professional organization. And we invited people who had had readings, etc. And I began the task of documenting the material and figuring out how to do the statistics on it. So I got the statistical package for the social sciences, the state-of-the-art way to run statistics in psychology and sociology, anthropology, etc. I hired a consulting statistician. My son, Charles, who's a computer programmer and scientist, helped me figure out, along with Eric, how we could code all of the human design data down to colors, tones, and bases. We needed to export all of the variables from the neutrino program, code them, enter the codes, translate the data into binaries or coding, ways, so I could import it into an astrology program and analyze the astrology with matched samples in a program called Jigsaw, and used Astro Data Bank, which is the data bank of birth dates for people that have been vetted to be accurate. So in my studies, I was able to match samples, general population for medical conditions, psychological samples that we gathered, and then match the samples using the data bank, and also illness data bank from the data that already existed. So I was gathering and working on all the science, while Ra and I were working on developing the materials. And in November of '99, he asked me to teach the first class on the dream rave. He didn't know anything about the dream or the sleep. And so he asked me to teach it that November, which I did. And based on that, he came up with the keynotes and the structure within the body graph. I got wind in November, right around the time we were ready to present, that Ra, despite telling Marvin and me that we were the clinical arm and for professionals, he had invited Martin Grassinger to go to Taos and give a talk that he would attend with Zeno and Chaitanya. And he wanted to sell our materials. And I looked at Ra and I said, Ra, that's double dipping. You can't take 20% from them and split 50% with me, and they're selling our materials, and I'm not getting anything for having created them with you. So I said no to him. And at that point, he formed Jovian Archive without telling me. And the way he framed it after that was that he broke with Zeno and Chaitanya, and that Jovian Archive would be the human design for the general population. And it would be dumbed down, in his words, to a 4th grade level. He wanted my arm to be professional, scientific, and to stay outside of the human design community. So I began doing my work with the statistics. And I don't know how many times in 1999 and 2000 and 2001, Marvin and I visited Ra and stayed in his home. And he visited us and stayed in our home. But it was many, many, many times, to the point that we considered each other friends. And we considered, when he decided to get married, I baked him a cake and overnighted it to him because it was his favorite cake. So in those days, I would bake every day, and Ra loved eating baked goods and McDonald's and In-N-Out burgers and sushi. He liked sushi. Did not like my Indian spicy food. But we went along. Every time I found something in the data And mind you, Ra would come visit. So I would come downstairs with my output and I'd show him and I'd say, Ra, look at this. It's not here. Where do you want me to look now? And he would tell me where to look. And I would go back and I'd look again. Other than the structure of the body graph and the structure of the matrices that Ra confirmed were important to consider in the whole picture of a person, most of what he said, content-wise, did not hold up. And because of that, I went on my own path. But Ra and I continued to work together. In 2000, I was going to be the keynote speaker at the conference in Ibiza. And I canceled that trip because my daughter almost died. And I was so traumatized that I could not leave at that point. She had a situation that February and the meeting was April, and there was no way that I could leave a daughter who had a near-death experience. And I just couldn't do it. So I don't think that that went over very well with her. Mm-hmm. And after that, I really didn't have that much communication with him. I did communicate. And one of the things that bothered me was that I lost my train of thought. Yeah, one of the things that bothered me was that we had the dream design of a mammal, but we did not have the sleep design of a mammal. And that didn't make any sense to me from a medical standpoint, a psychological standpoint, or even a human design standpoint. So in 2000, one of our kittens died of cardiomyopathy. And his twin was healthy. It turned out that his twin lived to age 18. But because one died and the other one was healthy and did not have a heart issue, I thought since I had their birth time to the second, I could see where the differential was that would identify the difference between them. And that turned out to be the lunar minute. The lunar minute can differentiate about 10 minutes of the moon, which is very small. It's more like seconds for us. So it identifies twins. Ra didn't really have a way to identify twins, except colors, tones, and bases, which at the time he said we could not even use, even though I tested the concept of it, because we didn't know birth times to 10 seconds, and you needed 10 seconds in order to identify tone, color, and base. So regardless of that, I decided as an astrologer to use Lunar Minute, and I also had downloaded the angelic emotional matrix, which I confirmed existed with Ra. He said the voice told him it existed, but it hadn't given it to him. Gave it to me when I asked. So during the year 2000, I was very busy doing the research. And I was also trying to expand the calculations to get more depth of science behind it, because the things Ra had said were not holding up. And what I found when I laid out the 4 charts with the calculations was that they hit critical periods in human early development. And I had Eric Memmert sitting with me, and I asked him to run the postnatal charts. And I ended up with critical periods prior to birth and critical periods in the first 3 months of a baby's life. And when you see that kind of validation in a completely independent way, it tracks physiologically, psychologically, astrologically, developmentally. You have something that you know is reliable and real. It's not a story. It's data. And it's honest data. It's simply all you have to do is run the astrology, and it confirms the time frames. And the charts, amazingly, showed, as I did the statistics, that they held. So one of the books that I'm editing that Ra and I wrote together was a book called The Triple Design Matrix. And I'll show you the data from it in a few minutes. I'll show you the science that I ran. But it showed that the body graph held and type held across the dimensions. That's a very significant finding. And also, when you use the incarnation patterns, I call them, not crosses, but when you use the incarnation crosses across the 8 charts that make up our integrated consciousness, those key words weave the process of self-actualization and the issues that that person is confronting from a karmic level. So I began researching. Of course, Ra knew of the calculations. He got very angry at Eric and myself for doing the calculations, quote, behind his back. It was necessary to not talk to him about what I was doing, because every time I mentioned doing anything, Ra would tell me not to do it. So I got to the point where, starting in around 2000, 2001, I began to integrate my own psychological multidimensional knowledge from my training and my PhD into what I was seeing in the body map. And also because I was a student of the Tree of Life, Kabbalistic Tree of Life, I began to question why it wasn't being integrated. When I asked Ra about integrating the tarot cards and the major arcana, he told me all the voice told him was the major arcana are in the ajna, the throat, and the self center. I figured that one out and have a layout for that. And it makes sense according to the gates. But what Ra did not take into account is that the Tree of Life, as I talked about over the last 2 days, the Tree of Life in the 32nd path of intelligence that goes from the sacral center to the root says that the first task of consciousness is to bring spirit into physical form, which means that as we look at the human design body graph, we are here to bring our knowing of self, our knowing of who we are, and our knowing that we're here to manifest our true destiny and our life purpose. And every single one of us has that. And it shows in noble energy maps. It is there. The gift that Ra brought us was the gift of the body map and the gift of the reading of it from the standpoint of types and of connecting the astrology with the I Ching. And there's an intelligence in that. I shared that yesterday when I shared the way the G center is laid out in the body map and how it is in the tree of life. So those 8 paths of intelligence are part of understanding the channels and the gates in the body map. So I will change my view to gallery. Most people have their cameras off, but if anybody wants to ask a question about up to this time, ask it, because then I'm going to share the science. Anyone? Okay, then I'll share the science. I put the studies all into a document, and I called it The Science of Beyond Human Design, Integrating the 4 Worlds. I think I may even have something else there, but maybe not. Oh yeah, I put the Empress Key 3, a paper I wrote about the Empress Tarot card, into this. Okay, so let's get, I gave you my history, and this is all the history. So these are papers that I wrote between 1999 and 2002. At the time, I released the work and found that the people who wanted me to release more of the data wanted to misrepresent it. I was already familiar with that game from my training at University of Chicago, and I wasn't about to go there. So at the time I released these papers, they were on the Rave Life Sciences website for a very long time. They were on Unified Life Sciences for a very long time, and none of the human design people showed any interest in them. So now there is interest, perhaps. I republished them exactly as I did then. I didn't change things, other than reformatting them into a form you could use now. So I go into the synthesis that human design is, and in this document, I'm calling it the Human Design Body Graph and the Dream Rave Mammalian Matrix. So we're talking generally, when Rob was talking about the dream design, he was talking about the human design, the solar dream design, putting the body on its side. We don't have a waking cortex in the spiritual world. So that's why when I delineate the dream design, I do it as a 64-gate matrix, because we also know scientifically that there's carryover between the cortex of the brain when you're awake and when you're asleep. So one of the key concepts in the body graph is type. So here is a body graph. This is Princess Diana. Raul liked using her profile. And then I labeled the centers and the names of the centers, and then showed the different types as defined. A manifester, a motor to the throat, a manifesting generator. The sacral center has a way to get to the throat through some route. A generator only has the sacral center, but it doesn't go to the throat. Projector has a channel between two centers, but it doesn't have the sacral and it doesn't have a motor. And a reflector has no definition whatsoever. So based on those, using neutrinos for Rave Life Sciences, Eric Memmert's program, I randomly chose 5,000 from a general population with birth dates between 1917 and 1975 to approximate the clinical subgroup populations with which we were working. I used the SPSS, the Statistical Package for the Social Sciences. I had 2 replicated groups of 5,000 random birth dates between those years, and then 2 additional randomized group provided by the astrology program. And so I had 2 groups independently chosen to be random populations. And then for the years 1900 to 2000 is what we were choosing. We analyzed 5 general population samples of 5,000 each. And we compared frequency of type. So this is a table of the frequency. Table 1 is showing the frequencies that add up to 5,000, the percentages, a valid percent, in case there was some error, a cumulative percent. And then based on those, I ran frequency percentages analyzed using a z-test. And this is a table of the z-test values. A z-test is a statistical calculation that is used to tell you if the difference between 2 populations is statistically significant at the 99th percentile level of reliability. So what this told me was that we had 4 population types. Now, I modified that later. So the next paper was the revised research. And I revised it. It's the same data, but there's one column missing. Wait a minute. We're missing the manifester column. So I have to go back to the original research and find what's missing, because there was one column. The manifester is not in here. And we did have manifestors broken down. So I have to find how the program didn't convert it. But what we found was that, seeing if I say it here. We have type is validated, generators, manifesting generators, projectors, reflectors. I don't know, maybe I didn't do manifestors. And what we also found was that they held across their designs. So they held, there were types in the waking dream rave and the triple design matrix. So when we looked at the two sleeping designs and the waking design, that you could delineate type independently in all of them. The next study I did was the waking rave design. So here I used the groups again, and we were looking at frequency by type in the dream design. So what happens when we sleep? And I was also looking at the splits. Is it no split, single split, double split, triple split, quadruple split? And here we have the statistics. So these studies show, without any doubt, that the matrix itself is a valid matrix in differentiating states of consciousness and pathways. In addition, I looked at profile. Now, here's where science does not support interpretation. Profile is based on the hexagrams. So in table 1 and 2, I say table 1, graph 1 shows a regular pattern in profile occurrence in the general population, with the regularity of frequencies for the foundation cross profiles as compared to the changing cross profiles as defined in the human design system. The foundation cross profiles have a frequency of occurrence distributed equally across all foundation crosses of about 14 to 15 across all changing crosses of percent each. The changing cross profiles are equally distributed in frequency across each and all of them, around 2%. The regularity of occurrence of frequency speaks to the structural integrity of the calculation and its distribution in the general population. But it's sufficient to say that the significance between occurrences is structural within the calculation itself. And it doesn't lend itself to any interpretation. And I am adamant about this because look at this. I mean, you're ascribing meaning to these profiles and their mathematical frequencies. So it's like saying if somebody is, numerology is a 5, that you can really describe them compared to somebody who has a different numerology. You have to have a lot more data than that. It's very iffy here. And the premise in human design theory is that everyone comes into the world with a specific profile that shows his or her purpose, and that brings fulfillment. I agree that the keywords for the hexagrams have meaning when you read them as a process, but not when you take one moment in time and you ascribe meaning based on 1 or 2 lines of a hexagram of the I Ching. The hexagrams of the I Ching talk about changing lines, and they do that for a very good reason, because the construction of the I Ching, those philosophers knew that consciousness is never stagnant. It's moving, and you need to move with it. Then I did a paper doing the statistics on this triple design matrix. And I basically verified statistically each matrix contributes, and without input, I think looking to see. When you integrate the matrices, you know more than you would know with any one of them alone. So some of the delineating parameters in the spiritual world are the transits. And if they happen to be at a time when it was a critical period for you in development, it will act as an imprinting force. That's just common sense. Here's the different breakdowns of the 5 types. I did tell Ra in some of our last conversations that I had a problem with teaching 4 types because there are really 5. And he said to me, you teach 5 types because that's the science. You teach the science. I'm going to teach what I've been teaching because my ego won't let me not say that I'm wrong. He said that to me. I respect that he knew it, and I respect that he said it. And I respect that he dumbed the information down to an understandable level, because honestly, I'm not capable of it. So here you have the statistics on all the designs. 8% of the population are manifestors, 36% generators, 21% projector, 1% reflector, 34% manifesting generator. That means that when you include all matrices and things get activated on the unconscious level, you are a manifesting generator 99% of the time. Name found, she did 140 charts, or I should say, I ran them, and then she ran some of them. We ran 140 charts for the Santa Fe meeting and the multidimensional noble energy maps. And when she ran each one, she found there was only one person out of 140 who was a projector. There were 4 generators. There was 1 manifestor. Everybody else, 99% of the population, manifesting generators. That's really important. So I did the graphs. Here's the graphs of the different matrices and the types. So you see, we live in a waking world. And if the people in the waking world are not telling us about the other worlds and how to live in them, we're not going to do it. This is the frequencies, waking rave design, waking lunar. So this is the solar design, the lunar design, and waking rave design, solar dream design, waking lunar design, and solar lunar design. So I gave types for that. and they're all significant. What does that significance show? I say in this paper, and this was in 2001, because consciousness changes significantly across all the types as consciousness moves from waking dream rave consciousness to solar dream rave, we can feel confident in saying that something very important happens during this shift. It is apparent that the biggest shift that happens is that more people become reflectors as their state of sleep consciousness deepens. And this process occurs for all types as they move through the three states we're measuring. In other words, reflectors, those with no definition at all in their matrix, increase the frequency across all consciousness stages that we're measuring in the matrix. In the other four types, the shifts are toward fewer people having that kind of type. The biggest shift in consciousness seems to occur in manifesting generators, since they move from 34% as manifesting generators in the waking rave design to 0.7% manifesting generators in the solar dream design. On a clinical practical level, we have noted that manifesting generators seem to have the most difficulty with sleep disturbances and have the most complex strategy to employ in waking functioning as well. And I said, as a commentary to this recently, this statement is highly significant on a clinical level and may have health implications as well. Oh, let me tell you about the health implications. We have not run statistics on the lunar minute or solar minute calculations. The lunar minute calculation differentiates twins on a genetic level. This is documented by my twin kittens and their charts that we use to verify the difference. It serves as the calculation for the physical matrix, both prenatally and postnatally. In addition, studies of the statistics will verify its validity and reliability. So, what I might be able to show you, oh, let me see if I have any other statistics before I do that. Oh, I did one, the manifesting generator as differentiated from the generator, because I wanted to prove that they were two independent types. And so I used basically the same research, although I could add a piece in here, which, where are the statistics? Oh, I guess I didn't put the statistics in here as a table. I'll double check that. But they are a differentiated type. And then for those of you who are interested, and I will release this, I put a paper I wrote years ago called Venus, the Empress, Tarot Key 3, the Tree of Life, the I Ching hexagrams, and the Four Worlds. I know some people are going to love it. And the cards in here are the cards that I colored. If there's more than one. No, there's just one. It's probably a very dense paper. But I wanted to see if at the beginning of this I put the Four Worlds. I don't think I did. But let me get an image of the Four Worlds again, because I want to reiterate to you the significance of what I found. Okay, I can use this. No, it's not gonna. No, won't do it. Okay, so, oh, I have to stop the share. I have to start the share. Does anybody have questions before I move forward? Okay. Recently, out of this awareness. Notice the solar plexus. The solar plexus only exists in the spiritual world through the 5342. And the spiritual world channel is not the channel between the root and the sacral center. So it only gets to the sacral center through the 5342, 15.5. So I want you to really think about this. It finally hit me that if you ask the question, what is so important in us as humans that we would be designed by the divine to only on a physical level connect with the core of all life? The 15.5 is the only channel in the whole body map that exists in all four worlds as a single channel. Now, the 10, if you trace the 34 to the 10, to the 57, we see that the 57 is in the spiritual world, but the 3410 is in the emotional angelic world. The 20 is in the spiritual world, but all of them are in the mental world. So we're here to integrate, but we don't always have all the information we need to integrate. So if you look at the physical world and you look at the fact that in order to transform physical energy into spiritual understanding, we must have intuition about it, and we must experience it in all four bodies. It must be integrated. Health is an integrated world task. Being in physical form is challenging because part of physical form is impacted by our crown and our ajna and our consciousness, our emotional body that takes emotional reactivity that it only exists in the physical and emotional angelic world and the mental world. The mental world hooks up the solar plexus, but the solar plexus does not exist in the emotional angelic world or in the spiritual world. So what I've come to from that is what makes sense to me. But meditate on this for yourself. What does it mean that this is the structure that Ra was given? He was given the spiritual world. He was given the physical world. I was given the emotional world, which is completes them. And we know 33 is a sacred number. And what is the 33? The 33 gate matrix teaches us how to transform physical world, mental world energy into higher dimension consciousness so that we are no longer locked into physical form. Does this make sense to you? This is what emerged from the validation of the body maps. Remember, what I found from a content standpoint, we need to test, we need to document. We're getting clinical data as to the truth of some of what Ross said based on astrology and the hexagrams of the I Ching. But what he said physically, not so much. But he didn't understand physical health. And what I've come to recently in terms of that, maybe I'll share my other document with you. Hold on. Right, I have to stop the share before I can share it. Do I have, this document is missing one diagram that Cindy had put in yesterday. Let's see if I can grab it.
What's it missing?
The sacral to the root.
Oh. See if I can dig one up.
I can go to the document and find it, and I can do that. I think it's in this document. I'll just pull up this document and go to it there if I have it there. Oh, it's not in that document. That's the wrong document then. Not this one either. Maybe it's this one. Yeah, this one has it. Okay, so what I can do is I can share my desk. Oh.
Do you want me to put it in chat? I just found it. I didn't realize I wasn't.
Sure.
Green chat or the thing chat?
Why don't you put in their chat so they have it?
Okay.
And then I can just share my document.
Okay. Hold on a minute and I will drag it over.
Well, no, I lost my document.
Sacral to root, right?
Yeah.
Here, I just sent it.
Okay, so that's in the chat. In the chat. Oh, well, I don't need it. Okay, I'm just gonna
Do you want me to put it in green chat?
No, I have it. I'm just not dealing with sharing my screen well. Okay, so what I want you to be looking at is I want you to notice that when you look at that sacral center to the root, you're seeing three formats, like in the 64 gate matrix. But if you look at the tree of life, okay, I was talking about the sacral center to the root. And the tree of life shows that there are four worlds. Now, in the tree of life, when you go up a path, and this week we're going to go up the 31st path to Hod, that's the channel of judgment. But there, in the human design body graph, there are three channels. So when you're looking back at the matrices, we are informed by the world card in the 32nd path that spirituality is going to integrate 3 of the 4 worlds, but it's going to be integrated into the physical world, which is looking away from spirit. And our task is to take the real waking world, the world of emotional reactivity and of being in a human form, and becoming spiritual, loving beings, just like the Bible taught we should be. Everything needs to be turned into love and acceptance of the divine being inside each one of us. And so when what began to inform me, and I want you to really get this because it's going to change things, is that if we listen to the card and notice that there are 3 leaves encompassing the figure, and the figure is an angelic figure. So if we're going to be self-actualized, we must transform everything that happens to us in the waking world into spirit. And when we look at the emotional world, we see that the emotional world has 3 channels going to the root, but they're only in the physical world and the mental world. So emotional reactivity that happens chemically must be mastered spiritually through the spiritual angelic matrix in order for us to be able to understand the meaning spirit wants us to get from it. And once we do, it's cleared. Lester Levinson experienced that in the Sedona method when he took all past reactivity and asked himself on a spiritual level, can I be free of it? Access bars does the same thing, right and wrong, good and bad. POC, point of creation, and POD, point of destruction, all 9s, shorts, boys, POVADs, and beyonds. It is taking the 32 paths of intelligence from head points that Gary Douglas delineated and using spiritual energy and statements of clearing. The access bars clears the points, especially the implant band at the back of the head. And you release attachment to any emotion you ever experienced in the physical world. Every physical emotion in the physical world is not spiritualized. So the lesson is that if we are spiritual and we use our emotional intelligence to reinterpret illness, disease, and physical sensations, we move to a higher level of consciousness and release attachment to whatever is locked within our body. We are here to be intuitive, to know what we know, to bring what we know to other people who don't know, but to do it in a way that already sees them as divine. Osho said, "You're all Buddhas pretending not to be." He saw the integrated being 99% of the population are here to manifest their full potential. Why weren't we told that? Okay, so I've said a lot of things, and I'm wondering how it's sitting with all of you. My stats to answer the question are international stats. The groups are matched for latitude, longitude, and date and time of birth. So they would be essentially identical twins. But identical twins born at the same exact time. When you have a database in Astro Databank of millions of records, that's not hard to do. Somebody says they don't know where to go from here. Go inside. Do your own inner search. Look at your integrated chart. I assume you have it from Name. So look at it. Feel free to either schedule. I'm going to be doing some YouTube readings for people who can't afford a full reading with me. But also, if you've been in one of these webinars and need to talk to me privately for 15 minutes or a half hour, just go on my calendar and schedule it with me. Not in the next week. Wait till October, please. My grandson is going to be visiting next week with his wife, and I haven't seen them in several months, and he's visiting from Israel. So it's pretty scary that they're in a war zone. And so he's going to be here next week visiting us. And then he's going to be in Texas. He's here for a month. So he'll be in Texas at our daughter's and his mom and dad's. And then he's with us next week. So I'm not going to be scheduling anything other than my classes next week. But later in October, feel free, and I'm happy to help you know where to go. If you're a projector who becomes a generator, that means that you often go to sleep not knowing what you want to do. And then you wake up in the morning with some clarity. In that case, I would look at the postnatal lunar chart and see what it's doing. Because many times a person who is undefined in the waking design or has a definition a week later changes. And that change may be significant in a decision. So if you become more defined with each passing calculation, that's important. Note where and what meaning that gate or hexagram has for you. And please, always go to source when in doubt. Go to the I Ching books. Go to an astrology book. Go to my books. I wrote Beyond Human Design, which has all of the channels in all of the worlds in the matrices. Now, I didn't write how they are when it's activated in a transit that impacts your matrix, but treat that like a transit. But if you are on the fence about whether to believe my work or to stay in the human design community, go to the original source. Go to the I Ching. Go to the Tree of Life. The Tree of Life has 4 worlds. Every single chakra has 4 worlds. It's throughout our history. Playing cards have 4 suits. We have 4 grandparents. Maybe 1 in each world. I don't know, but be a scientist. Don't be a believer. Ross said, don't believe me. Do your research. I did my research. I did the statistics. I'm doing the clinical research. And I'm telling you, without the multidimensional charts, it didn't explain my clinical practice. It didn't explain the dreams of my clients. It didn't explain my kids. It didn't explain why I wait and I wait and I wait and I wait. Isaac. And then Tina.
All right. Another mind-blowing or mind-expanding presentation. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
I was on a walk and I was listening to the YouTube channel of Human Design Academy, just to like listen to Ra's voice, because I hadn't heard Ra's voice really, like consciously, like in movement. So like, okay. And he mentions 4 types, and he based it on doing, I guess, 5,000 made up birth dates as his source of data with whoever helped him run and create those dates, for justifying or for saying that there are 4 types, which now in some circles of the human design community treat any person that brings up 5 types as being pop human design.
So Isaac, when Ra did that, what year was it?
I don't recall.
Was it before or after 2000?
I'm going to lean and say before 2000.
If it was before 2000, it was before I did my research. And Ra did it with Zeno and Chaitanya, and maybe Jurgen, maybe Martin. There was a whole group. Now, a little history about Ra's group. The first time I went to Taos, Marvin and I got to the airport in Albuquerque, and we picked Chaitan up at the airport to drive with him to Taos. And about midway, I turned to him and I said, Chaitan, what kind of name is that? What's the origin of your name? And he said he was a sannyasin. So Marvin and I are sannyasin. We were with Osho too, but we never went to Oregon, because by the time Bhagwan got to Oregon and became Osho, he was contaminated. 6 months after Marvin and I got back from India, we took everything we brought home from the ashram and we literally burned it, including all the photographs of ourselves. And I wish I had them, but it was right to burn them because we wanted nothing to do with the ashram anymore. It was contaminated. It had turned to a cult. And there were people standing behind Osho with a machine gun. And some of those people are in the human design community. So when I said, Chaitan said, I'm a sannyasin, Marvin and I, in all honesty, could say, we are sannyasin too. That immediately put us in the inner circle. Zeno and Chaitanya, look at their names. They're sannyasin. So as soon as Ra heard that we were sannyasin, we were acceptable. And at one point, when he was sitting in our yard, I said to him, so Ra, tell me, why did you pick us? And he said, it wasn't my choice. He said, but I knew when you and Marvin walked into house that you were it. He was told. So, you know, I did the science. I validated it, not just in the human design. And, you know, I originally said 4 types. But then when I really looked at the research, you can't say 4 types. It's not right. And I revised the research, to be honest. And, you know, Rod didn't want that. So there is a lot of research that needs to be done, especially on the amino acids and the physiology. What Ross said about AIDS patients, heart attack patients, people who make promises, none of that was true. Fertility, not true. I literally confirmed conception with people, and they didn't have the 59.6. So I haven't presented the science because the human design community did not want it. And I'm not doing my work to be a human design analyst. I'm doing it as a social scientist, psychologist, who knows that we've been misled by believing that the mental world is going to make us happy. It doesn't. And reading a chart with a formula is not the way to read a chart. Tina.
Hi. First of all, I'm big on research, and maybe me and Name needs to contact. I don't see her today, but I'll email her. Maybe we need to contact about several aspects that I think we can measure, and then like with your approval, we can have everyone participate and just
I would
the
love
data.
that. And also, I want to do some additional calculations, because this piece about the triangle at the bottom of the tree of life, where when you get to the path of probation, after you've passed through the death and the devil and all of that, they've seen it yesterday. When you pass through that, that's when you can ascend to the higher levels in the 33rd 3-gate matrix. But until then, you're still dealing with physicality and the belief that your body is limiting. So I'd like to use some of the astrological components of that and see if any of the dwads or the harmonics are going to play in and amplify and further expand what we're identifying within the body map.
Okay. Okay.
You get what I'm saying?
Yes. Yes. Okay. Something. Okay. Someone is asking, what astrological system do you use? Is it tropical? Someone is
I
asking.
use tropical Placidus. I have used tropical Coke, but it didn't time to my chart as accurately. But when I'm doing a full reading for someone, and Tina, you may want to do this, I always run the prenatal, natal, and postnatal in the solar world and the lunar world. Not so much in the other worlds because they're so close, but I have run the postnatal solar minute to look at attachment in a baby with its mother. And I've found some pretty interesting things when there has not been a good bond. between the charts. So that's another area that we should research clinically.
Okay, so I have another point. I wanted to ask about the 7 bodies that we learn about in alchemy, the 7 bodies of the human. So how does this correlate with the 4 worlds? It's the physical, astral, mental, causal.
Yeah,
the 7.
when we start ascending into the other bodies and the other worlds, it's not of this dimension.
Mm.
You know, we can be in our body and download information. You've done it, I've done it, Janice has done it, Justina's done it. I mean, I see when I look at somebody if they have psychic ability, and I know when people channel. You know, you can see it. The energy field has a certain frequency to it, but there are people who are locked into the physical form. And I'd say the people who are here have probably had various, we don't go, it is a Gutman scale, but it's not a Gutman scale in all worlds at the same time. So you can be more advanced physically and less advanced spiritually, or more advanced mentally. You know, there are so many variables. We could be crazed, but slowly, slowly, as Osho would say. Okay, I can take one more question. Otherwise, if you want, I can do a small meditation, but I have to stop promptly at 4. As some of you know, my computer died. My big, wonderful 27-inch computer. So I've been on a laptop, and it is not likely I'm going to get my hard drive back. So I'm going with my son to get a big monitor, because I don't know that big screens are going to be made anymore. So I have a mission, a computer mission today. Talk about the waking world and challenges, right? Right before all my lectures, right before giving my publisher 5 more books, my computer dies.
I've got your book today.
Good. Ooh.
Finally. I've been waiting since ever.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah.
Okay, so you too. Nice. I'm coming out with one on the patterns of orientation, which will be basic for how the crosses operate in the design, the opposites in the wheel, and where they are for the sun and the earth and the moon. And I use the keywords. I don't use profile, because the keywords give you the 4 world lessons that you have to go through. And so when you look at this document, you will have not only the cross of your sun and earth, but you'll have all 8. And it will cross-reference all of the other places, plus definitions of all the gates and all the patterns. And I will add, I have to find my document, but I think there's a document I did that has clean questions for all paths of intelligence. And the paths of intelligence correlate with the body maps, but I don't know how exactly yet. So, okay, do you want me to do a meditation, or you don't care? Raise your hand if you, okay. Okay, I'll do it. Okay. Find a comfortable place where you can be internal, settling with an in-breath into the place in yourself that has always known who you are, the place where you know what you know, and nobody can ever tell you you don't know it. That self is the self that says, I am. I know. I want. I think. I breathe. All of the voices of the throat, but also the voices of the soul. The voices that speak to you in a whisper that can be drowned out by the mental world. So sink into the place in yourself where you know what you know. And that place is a place of stillness. It's a place of breath and a place of spirit. As you settle into the core of yourself, make sure that you're breathing in and exhaling a longer exhale than an inhale, allowing yourself to rid yourself of any debris, any residuals, any energy, any feelings, any thoughts, anything that came from outside of you that is misaligned. Could you release it and just let it go? Know that when you let it go, no thought goes back to it. No feeling arises when you think of it. Would you let it go so it's gone from your consciousness? And then when will you do this? In the future? In the now? Certainly you didn't in the past. So how about setting an intention? As the past, as my stepping stones come to mind, as past memories come to mind, I could and would let go of any aspects of it that disempower, disengage, or bring me distrust for myself. And from that place, release from the point of creation to the point of destruction. You are then free. In that space of being free, all possibilities are open to you. In that place of spirit, you no longer think. You no longer react. You are. In this place of being, there's only breath and spirit. The life breath of spirit, bringing you stillness, still as a mountain, flowing as a stream, grounded and loving, and so glad to be yourself in your body at this time and this place where you can explore the dimensions of consciousness freely and step into them fully, without censorship, without ramifications, because you are in yourself. From this place in yourself of freedom, begin to reactivate your consciousness in your body, taking a cleansing breath, coming back into the waking world where you are and you are not. And keeping your perspective as you move into spirit and mental waking world. Fully awake, alert, opening your eyes and coming back into the room. Okay, everybody. Have a great evening and a great inner process. Thank you. And I'll be doing questions and answers tomorrow. So come prepared. I'm not going to be prepared to lecture.
May you find your perfect monitor for what you need.
Excellent. Thank you. I need that.
Yes, I feel it.
Take care. Bye.